What is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Gsluke, here with our live stream for Thursday Night Football. It's opening night, and it means there's a lot of attention on this Thursday night game and plenty of large field contests. We've got Billy makers across a few sites, a lot of 20,000, 100,000, even 200, 250,000 type of jackpot contest out there, which means we've got some showdown strategy to go through. So going to talk about all of the inactives and actives, all of the implications of that, one namely being Travis Kelce. That's a huge talking point. Then we'll talk about a few props that I've got my eyes on, any questions that you've got down in chat at any point. Just overall, make sure we're ready for tonight's slate. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing started. So a good way to start this off, and I think a good starting point, is with that inactive list, right? So let's take a look at who's actually going to be playing tonight. It's worth noting that before we hop into the Chiefs players, that there's one key inactive that actually isn't listed here, and that is Chris Jones. So he's not technically on the roster, so the Chiefs weren't going to put him on their list because he's technically not even on their team as of right now. But you have Travis Kelce not playing. And then outside of that, a whole lot of unknown prospects, at least to me, right? I'm not a huge Chiefs stan, right? I'm not paying attention to them every single week. But the huge one being Travis Kelce. And a lot of people were, expecting that. I would say I was like 30%, 70% between him playing versus not playing. And now that we have the confirmation that he's not playing, it starts to clear up our scripts a little bit. Before I was a little bit more heavy on the Chiefs side, and much like a lot of the industry out there, people have started to come along on the Lions. They went from 6.5 point underdogs to 4.5 point underdogs as of this morning. And then the last time that I checked, and it may have even moved again, they were just 4 point underdogs. And I honestly expect that to move to at least 3.5 at some point. If not to get to just a solid 3 points there for the Detroit Lions. And that's against the Kansas City Chiefs at home, right? Let's remind ourselves that some of the better home field advantage is there for the Chiefs at home, right? They're known for that, right? They're extremely rowdy out there, especially for an island game like this. So I don't know if I really buy the Lions team all that much. At 4.5 points, I was considering laying a bet on the Detroit Lions. But it's definitely going to have a huge impact, right? Without Travis Kelce, they're going to have to change their game plan on offense. They can't be nearly as vertical with the offense. They aren't as explosive as they were before. And I think you're going to see a lot more checkdowns. I think Patrick Mahomes might have to create a little bit more with his feet, which are a few things that I targeted for props. So, with Travis Kelce, moving out of the fold, I think we see a slightly different offense, which if you can kind of figure out what they're going to do to tinker with, which is completely subjective, right? It's not like we have a concrete idea of what's going to change. But if you can figure out what is going to change, that could be a huge edge for you tonight. So for me, right, it's just using my intuition, right, as a former football player. I'm somebody that's been very in tune with the sport ever since I've honestly like 8 years old. I'm here at this point. I know that whenever you lose some of your better weapons, right, you start to play like the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, right? It's a lot of, instead of vertical passing, right, it's a lot of horizontal passing, right? It's a lot of screens. It's a lot of set up plays to a Tony, a Sky Moore, a Jerick McKinnon, for example. I think that's what we're going to see, right? You're not going to see guys like Tony, right, try and take over that down the field threat. I don't think you're going to see guys like Sky Moore to try to replicate that. It's just not feasible, right? Travis Kelce is an elite of the elite tier player. Instead, I think you see them spread out the field, right? Especially with all those explosive, young, extremely fast targets, right? They have a lot of speedsters out there on the Chiefs. I think you're going to see that, right? Andy Reid, we must not forget, right? And everyone out there, right, that's hammering the Lions right now. I was considering it until I remember they have Andy Reid on the other side, right? One of the masterminds when it comes to offensive plays out there. Must we forget that even with shitty offenses in the past, right before they got Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid was able to cook out there. I have a sneaking suspicion that the Chiefs are going to cover this 4 number here and win maybe by a touchdown or two. So I'm still playing a lot of the Chiefs stacks, but I'm doing it differently, right? I'm taking some of the higher tier options like an Amon-Ra on the Lions. I'm obviously taking Jared Goff in a lot of those lineups too, because we can afford them now, right? Before I was talking about using Mahomes and Kelce in a lot of lineups together, right? Both 12K a piece. Well, we don't have to do that anymore, right? We can go out there, take a 12K Mahomes, maybe even take him at captain, right, for $18,000 and still take a $9,000 Goff, or what is it, a 10,000, let's see, at flex, yeah, $10,200 Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? That's completely doable, right? You can make that kind of lineup work without having to punt with like 2 or 3 spots in your lineup. So it completely changes the dynamic here, not only from the Chiefs' perspective, but also from the lineup construction perspective, right? Whereas a lot of people, it was like 60, 70% of the field were taking Travis Kelce in their lineups. Well, now that salary has to be redistributed, right? So obviously, a lot of the guys priced just below him are getting that steam, but instead of a Khalif Raymond, I think, is a great example of this, by the way. Instead of him being 30% owned, I have him well under 20% now, right? I have him closer to like 15% owned when it comes to his flex ownership, which is a huge difference, right? Now, in fact, you could play him if you want to for some leverage down low. Somebody like a Noah Gray, right, $2,400 is going to be higher owned, right, than a Khalif Raymond. So part of that is because of salary. You don't have to spend the whole way down to $800 anymore because you're not taking a Kelce and a Mahomes together. And because you had injury concerns ahead of him, right? Obviously, Noah Gray being the top tight end is going to get some exposure, and he projects really well. Full disclosure, I'm still playing Noah Gray on this slate. So it's not like I'm avoiding him, but ownership has distributed a little bit differently. Some of these middle tier players, let's see, like a Sky Moore, are much higher owned now. Even guys like Jerick McKinnon, MVS, are getting some attention there. Josh Reynolds, obviously Noah Gray, right, significantly more expensive than some of the real lower tier options, are getting a little bit more steam now. And another example of a guy kind of going down in ownership, right, would be a Justin Watson. In fact, for one of my updates there on Tuesday, you had Justin Watson at about 15% projected owned. Now he's closer to 5% because when you don't have to spend up for those, 2 12K options, there's not as much of a need, right, to go down here and take a $200 player, right, like a Justin Watson. Instead, a lot of those lineups are landing on that, $2,400 player or that Noah Gray down low. Josh Reynolds, right? Maybe if you want to spend a little bit more up there, those kind of players are a lot more prominent in lineups than what they were before. So it's not just the Chiefs ownership, the Chiefs wide receiver shares that we have to worry about. It's everyone else, right? It affects pretty much the entire slate. So I was working on 2 sets of projections the entire week. If you guys are over there on the Patreon, you could probably see them. But yeah, I had one set up with Kelce, right, being limited, and then one without Kelce, knowing that he was probably going to get rolled out. In the ownership distributions, the exposure that I'm getting to looks completely different on either sheet. So I prepared for it, right? I didn't want to be scrambling last second to go out there and make changes to it. But if you guys want to see the exact players that I'm on, you guys know where to check that out, is on the Patreon page. But yeah, we're not going to bring up the projections here on this stream, right? If you want to ask me about specific players, especially when it comes to ownership, just let me know. I am more than willing to give you guys a few specific numbers on there, but I'm going to leave the sheet off the screen, right? I'm not going to share it up there and whatnot. Of course, I want to keep it behind the table, right? Make sure that the player pool, the guys that I'm heavy on, right, aren't going to be out there. And I also have one thing to note, guys. If you saw the sheet there for the Monday video, but I added a few new categories. So we have the flex pool, the captain pool, but I also added a script section where if somebody I'm only going to play like in certain scripts. So let's say, for example, like I'm only going to play Patrick Mahomes with like at least a few wide receivers. Like that's a pretty straightforward script, right? I mentioned that on there, right? I'll say that a player might be a little bit script dependent, and then I mention how I'm playing that player. And a lot of different tout sites out there, you're not getting that from them, right? They're not talking about why they're getting to certain players or how they're using them out there. It's just a start, right? It's the first way that I'm trying to go out there and give you guys that detail. But over the season, I'm sure we'll add to that even more. So if you're on the Patreon, you know what I'm talking about over there, but it just tries to give you a better idea of why I'm playing the guys that I am. So worth noting from the slate perspective, In terms of total ownership, Patty Mahomes is nearly 94% owned. So pretty much everyone is using Patrick Mahomes. Players like Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown were about like 55 to 60% total owned before. Now they're about 75% owned a piece, right? So because there's no Kelce, all of those top tier options are getting significantly higher owned. And because the slate is priced much softer than you see most slates, like obviously Travis Kelce being out of there is a huge byproduct of that, right? But even so, you don't have that many guys that are priced like $8,000 and above, right? So all of them are going to be super mega chalky. So if you're starting a lineup with Goff, Mahomes, and let's say like Amon-Ra, or maybe you take like a Gibbs down there, don't feel like you're egregiously chalky, right? You almost have to take like 3 of those 4 players to make a lineup work. And where you're really going to worry about ownership on the slate like this, like pretty much whether you're captain or you're up top, is in the middle tier range, right? Or your value options, right? Down there from $4,000 and below, you want to have at least 1 to 2 pivots in every GPP lineup, right? I think you could simplify this slate a little bit, right? A lot of times we talk about, script building, all of that, right? That matters, right? You want to be building with the script in mind when you build all of your lineups out here. But when you're looking for leverage, like if you're worrying about differentiation, I think 2 pivots is enough. If you have 2 guys that are going to be sub 15% owned, I think you can feel pretty solid about your lineup. Like I said, you're going to have to take some of this chalk up top. So I don't want to look at like product ownership, even, total ownership if your optimizer has that, because this is just going to throw it out of whack, right? Maybe you take 1 pivot up here, right? Your pivots would be like a Kadarius Toney, right? We mentioned him before. I've got him at sub 20% total ownership. You could take a Marvin Jones Jr., right? He's also going to be sub 20% total ownership there. But I mean, if you're taking the chalk, which I think is the prudent move on this slate, just 1 or 2 spots down low, differentiate, right? And I think you're going to have a decent slate. A few must-haves. Sky Moore, I think if you're playing more than 20 lineups, has to be in your player pool. Noah Gray, if you're playing more than 20 lineups, I think he has to be in your player pool. That doesn't mean that they're 100% going to get there, right? It also doesn't mean play them in every lineup. It does mean if you're playing any significant amount of lineups, you should have some exposure, right? Whether you're taking half the field, right, and just taking a little nibble there. Maybe you're matching the field or trying to get double, sometimes 3x the field like you do with a few players out there. I think that Noah Gray and Sky Moore, because of the lack of Travis Kelce and where they're priced, I don't want to say are must plays, but to me, are borderline must plays. Somebody like a David Montgomery, he's not a must play, but he certainly becomes a lot more intriguing, right, after some of the changes. Lions are expected to be a lot more competitive in this game. As such, I took some of his rushing props out there. So first off, I think for DFS, he also brings upside there. But, just thinking about the game script, right, if we think that the Chiefs are going to be a little bit limited there, obviously the Lions might be a little bit more live to win the game. If they're playing from ahead, David Montgomery becomes a lot more attractive. So I mentioned that on the Monday preview. Didn't go into a ton of detail there, but now that we've had Kelce rolled out, we've had the line movement there a little bit. I don't hate David Montgomery, but like I said, I still think the Chiefs are going to win this game, so I wouldn't go crazy with the Lion stacks. And something kind of working against the Lion stacks is they're a lot more popular now, right? It's not as bold of a take, right, to go out there and say that you think the Lions are going to have a chance in this game. So while I do think that there's more merit to getting to the Lion stacks, I also think more people are going to get there, right? So it's a double-edged sword, right? It's going to help you out, but at the same time, it could screw you with higher ownership numbers, right? Lack of leverage with some of the players that you thought were going to be mega low owned. I'm not sure are going to be the case, right? Like Montgomery, like doubled in ownership, right? Ever since the last like day and a half out there. Let me think. Guys like Amon-Ra, right? Jared Goff, right? Were 10, 20, sometimes 25% lower owned than what they were just before today. It's not nearly as much of a leverage play, right? In fact, I would say like both teams are getting close to even in ownership, right? I mean, the running backs, I would say it's like a relatively even split between the two teams. The quarterbacks, right? Mahomes is your highest owned player. So that hasn't changed. But like the middle tier guys, even like the values, like I know somebody, what's his name? Noah Gray, right? Like he's going to be mega chalk, right? He's going to be like 30, 35% owned. But Khalif Raymond, guys like Reynolds are still like 15% owned. It's not like one team is getting that much more exposure than the other that like the Lions are like the hipster pick here. They're not, right? That's changed, right? So if you're going into lock thinking that they're going to be mega low owned, I hate to say it, that's not going to be the case, right? So you might need to step back, reevaluate the slate a little bit. And, like me, if you still think that Andy Reid is going to Andy Reid and go out there and make this thing work, you should probably be on some Chiefs players, right? You should probably be trying to go out there and take some 4-2 stacks or some 3-3 stacks with Mahomes and some of his best targets. So that's the way I'm attacking this slate. Just to go ahead, build most of a lineup to give you guys an idea of how I'd attack this. Let's go out there. We're going to take Amon-Ra as our captain, right? But look at how we handle this. So we're definitely going to put Mahomes in there. Going to throw Jared Goff, right? Those are almost must plays. We're going to take one more line. We're going to make this a 3-3 stack. But we're going to make this real contrarian here in a second. So for our last lion, we're going to go ahead and take Reynolds. He's about the same ownership as Khalif Raymond, right? So it's not like he's much lower owned than the other. It's just that I think that Josh Reynolds projects a little bit better, right? So that's why I went with him. In terms of our Chiefs players, right, this is where we're going to get really different. And the first way we're going to do so is with a Kadarius Toney, right? He's one of the lower owned options on the Kansas City Chiefs. And rather than going down here and taking a Sky Moore, right, who I think projects fantastically, right? He's actually cheaper than what you have there with Kadarius Toney. The issue is ownership, right? I need to get some leverage here in this lineup. So this would be building for the large field GPP, right? Like this $10 contest that we have right here. If you're in like a single entry, 2 to 3 max, maybe you play Sky Moore, right? At this leg of your lineup, or if you get to this kind of build towards the end. But in large field GPPs, my lineups look a little bit more contrarian, right? I force in a pivot like a Kadarius Toney. And in fact, with our last spot here, I'm going to leave a bunch of salary on the board and I'm going to add one more pivot. And that would be potentially like a, what is his name? Richie. Sorry, I couldn't think of his first name. I was blanking there for a second. Richie James Jr. You could take a Ross. I'm not sure if he's going to get much playing time, so I probably wouldn't take him. Or maybe even a Watson at $200, right? Maybe I'll leave $3,000 on the table, right? And put this in the large field GPP. A couple things would be accomplished, right, by doing so. First off, differentiating. Make sure I'm not duplicating with a bunch of people out there. Second off, giving us leverage to the field. But actually giving us a chance to move up those leaderboards. I know it's not like the plus EV play, but at the end of the day, do we think there's a massive projection difference between a Noah Gray at $2,400 and then potentially a Watson, right, at $200? Both of them need to score a touchdown to be optimal, right? Both of them are probably going to get a similar amount of looks, right? It's not like Noah Gray is going to go in there and instantly get 10 targets, right? That's not going to happen. So Watson maybe has a slightly lower projection. In fact, let me give you the projection difference. So I have Noah Gray at 9.2 points, which I think is actually very favorable for him. He should probably be projected lower, if we're being honest there. But I have Justin Watson at 5 points, right? So that's a 4.2 point difference, right? 4.2 points, which sounds like a lot. It's really not, right? When you're looking for a ceiling performance, that median projection really doesn't mean all that much, right? Especially when it's only like 4 points. And you're not going to win a GPP with one of those guys scoring 9 points. Or in fact, you might sneak into the top, but it's not going to win you that GPP, right? That's not going to be the leg that got you to the top of the leaderboard. So the point is, if I'm building for the large field GPP, I'm willing to take the guy at $200 if he projects even remotely close to the guy at $2,400, right? I'll go for that leverage. I'll try and differentiate myself to the field. And a lot of people probably would think that they're, different by taking a Noah Gray right here. I can tell you right now that there's going to be more people that play this combination of players with Noah Gray than that take it with a Lions defense up here. I guarantee you, right? Because it's a 3-3. You get the second wide receiver with the Patty Mahomes. So a lot of people out there just assume that leaving salary on the table will instantly make you more different than everybody else. Not always. In fact, the more different combination here, I can guarantee you, if you were to check this when the slate locked, would be to take the Lions defense. Crazy enough, right? And I know, right? Everyone tells you out there, oh, leave salary on the table to get different. It's not like an end-all be-all rule, right? There are special circumstances like what we have right here, where I can tell you right now that the Noah Gray combination projects higher, and thus in all of the optimizers out there, you're going to be spitting out lineups there with Noah Gray. So just especially if you're hand building, right, you can catch some of these fallacies, some of the issues out here with using an optimizer to build lineups, especially because like you see out here, you'd be like, oh, I have $900 left on the table, right? I'm definitely going to be different. not so fast. I'd say that much. How good will Mahomes and Montgomery do today? I think they'll be decent. I think Mahomes, fantasy-wise, is the best player on the slate, and I think that Montgomery has good dark horse equity. Right, I think he could go out there, score a touchdown. He's not going to post like 150 yards, right? He's not going to get you like 10 catches out of the backfield, but Montgomery could definitely score a touchdown. He could score a 2-touchdown game. I think he'll have 1 or 2 this season, but more than anything, he can get there, right? Especially if we're playing DFS. I don't think he's going to break any slates, though. Can I ask what you got for ownership on Gray? Yeah, I got you. So I've got Gray at 20% right now. Now, I think that's going to go up, right? I'm going to have one more update out before lock that'll probably come out here in the next like 30 minutes. So like 10, 15 minutes after we get off live stream here. And I've got him at 20%, total ownership at right around like 22%. So nothing crazy on Noah Gray. So if you want to play him, by all means, go ahead and do so. It's just that when you're in a large field GPP, right, 20% of how many entries here? Like 300,000 entries. That's 60,000 entries, right? Like we play golf GPPs out there week to week with 60,000 entries, right? So we're playing a whole GPP, right, against other people with just Noah Gray. So like, I don't know. I know this big GPP is probably a bad example, right? It's like the most extreme example of that. But in large field GPPs, I don't love playing them as much, right? Like at least in this scenario. Now, let's assume that we were up here at like $5,000 remaining, and we'd be leaving like $2-3 grand on the table by taking a Noah Gray. Well, then it's different, right? Because you're passing up on kickers, you're passing up on a CEH, a Rashee Rice, a Sky Moore, right? You'd be passing up on legit options, a Sam Laporta, or if you had that $5,000 remaining, then I like a Noah Gray. So it's all kind of dependent, right? That 20%, I know it doesn't seem crazy, but it's 20% of 300,000 entries, right? In the case of this contest right here. Let's see, what else do we got? Josh Reynolds pivot off of Noah Gray chalk. That's Goff's boy. I agree with you on that. That or just really leaving a lot of salary on the table, right? Leaving like $3,000 on the table and taking a Noah Gray, I think is the way to do so. Rice, deep threat. I'm not sure on his snap share, right? There's a lot of unknowns, which you could say that's a huge positive, right? Maybe he does get more snaps. Maybe he has some of the deep plays called for him out there. I just don't know about that, Metro. I'm not a huge Chiefs guy, right? Didn't watch all their preseason games or anything like that, but we'll have to see. The possibility is there. I drafted Rice in a lot of my best ball stuff because of that possibility, because I think we'll turn into that at some point this year, but I'm not sure it'll be this game, right? Like it's still early in the year. A lot of these rookies are very unpolished. And even some of the second-year guys, like third-year guys, young player like Sky Moore, he's extremely unpolished. Like, unless he's completely improved this offseason from what we saw last year, like he's their number one wide receiver. And for lack of a better word, he can't run routes. Like that's not a great sign, right? So we'll have to see if he's improved. I expect to see some kind of improvement, right? If he was given that number one wide receiver nod. But yeah, it's a tough scene for the Chiefs at wide receiver, to say the least. So yeah, Rice, I mean, you could take the shot there, right? If it's a tough scene, anyone could pop. You like Gibbs as the captain or Sky? Yeah, you like them because you play in them in your fantasy league. It's also why you took them for your props. You're not sly. Richie James is a baller. I have him in my poll, Randy. That's for sure. I agree with you there. He's a dark horse candidate, is extremely low owned, and he's cheap, right? He's like $2,000. So I agree with you there. I do worry about the play time, but he's way cheaper than Rice. So if you're going to take a pivot, I think I do prefer Richie James just because he has an established role, right? He's a veteran. He's not a rookie like what you have with a Rice, and probably gets a few more early snaps. That's my opinion on that. Yeah, he's a dog. Yep. Do you have an opinion on Blake Bell? I think he's a good flyer. I won't tell you if I'm playing him, but I think he's a decent flyer. He's a blocking tight end. He is. He's a blocking tight end that probably won't catch many balls. I think that Bushman guy they brought up, I'm not playing the Bushman guy, by the way. He's $200. He got brought up from the practice squad today. He's more of a, I think, receiving tight end compared to Blake Bell. So let's say that somebody like Noah Gray went down, right, and couldn't play. I feel like Bushman might be the one that does the receiving tight end, but that's speculative. I have no idea. I'm not again, big Chiefs guy, like I was saying before, but we'll have to see. Blake Bell's probably going to block a whole lot. He's probably going to play a lot of snaps. And honestly, like if you're that $200 tight end, you just got to get on the field, right? You just got to catch that 1-2 yard touchdown. It's doable. He could get there, right? He's only $200. Can you put him in the captain slot for James? Oh, I would not. No, but I mean, I think he might have a decent game, but no, somebody like Mahomes, right? Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's just going to outscore him from the raw points perspective, right? A ceiling performance for Richie James is probably 15 fantasy points at the very most. Obviously, one of those three is going to outscore him. Could sneak out and snag a TD. Yeah, exactly. Or are we selling our lineup short? I think so. So let me go over when you'd use like a $200 complete punt, right, at the captain spot is when all of the 10K options or all the really expensive options are like must plays. Now, I don't do it for NFL very often. There's not normally a slate that calls for that, but in NBA, it happens all the time, right? So like an example, I've won GPPs like this for NBA Showdown before. My NBA process, I normally don't give very many nuggets from, so I guess I'll give you one right here, though. Essentially, there was a Nuggets versus Lakers game where you had like Jokic, you had like Jamal Murray playing, obviously Anthony Davis, LeBron James. So you had like 4 really stud tier 10K options, and they were all in a really good stretch. Like both teams were on fire, colliding head course. And I was like, okay, like this is going to be a close competitive game. These guys are all going to go off, right? Like it's not a hot take. They're all projected for like 50 some fantasy points on Prize Picks. So I'm out there. I said, I'm just going to play all 4 of those guys together. And that cost like $45,000, $46,000 in terms of your salary. And then take one guy at $200 at captain, and then take like a 3K guy and call it a lineup, right? And the $200 player I took, I think was like Michael Porter Jr., and he was just coming off injury, and he only played like 5-6 minutes. So like no one used him and he went off, right? It's that kind of situation where you have to have all those like 50, 60 point scores that you do that, right? That's not going to happen tonight, right? Without Travis Kelce, there's not like those 4 guys up top that you have to have. So it's possible, but it's very unlikely, right? There's like better slates for that. Let me think. When it's the Chiefs versus the Bengals, right, for the last week 17, like that might be a slate to do that, right? Where you want to play Mahomes, Burrow together, Chase, and Travis Kelce, who's hopefully completely healthy by that time. That's the kind of slate where you can play like a $200 guy at captain. It's a very specific circumstance. All right, let's look at some props together. If you have any DFS questions, feel free to go ahead and throw it down in chat. But outside of that, I guess a few closing notes for DFS. I really like Sky Moore. So I agree with you, Bobby. I like Sky Moore tonight. But you're only saying that because you have him in your fantasy team. So let's not joke ourselves out there. I do like him, though. And I guess Josh Reynolds, but like if I was going to take a value down low, I think Josh Reynolds is the guy. Like Bobby was saying it before, like let's give him credit there too. Like I think that's a really sharp take, right? Taking him rather than Noah Gray. And perhaps like, I guess I mentioned it before, but we'll rehash it, right? Kadarius Toney, right? $7,000. He's going to play tonight. He's going to have some setup plays for him. He's one of those really good horizontal players, right? That has a lot of lateral quickness that can take a screen pass, get a lot of yards after catch, for example. $7,000. I know it's expensive. Like he's way overpriced, especially compared to like Sky Moore, MVS, a lot of the other targets. But he's also going to be like a half or third of the ownership, right? Like, so you're paying more for him, but you're getting a lot of leverage, right? So like you're paying for that leverage. Now that we're not taking Travis Kelce, right? He's not in the player pool. You can pay for that. You can afford it, right? It's not as unfeasible, right? To take a Kadarius Toney. Those are the guys I'd keep an eye out for, right? Toney, and then my 2 favorites down low. I guess throw Justin Watson in there too. So I guess my favorite 3 options down here. You can go Reynolds, you can go Justin Watson, and then I guess Richie James would be the last one. And then obviously I think up here, Kadarius Toney, not a bad idea. All right, let's look at some props. So in terms of props, the board changed quite a bit after we got the Kelce news, but a few props up here that I like. So one of them is game script dependent. It says over on Patrick Mahomes completions. Over here on the sports books, it was minus 130 towards the over. That has gotten adjusted a little bit. So let me check on it. So The completions mark for Patty Mahomes is now minus 120 towards the under. So it's, swayed slightly the other direction. This was actually minus 140 about 30 minutes ago. So it was actually even worse for the bet that I had entered before, which I was kind of bummed about. But it's starting to come back towards even money. And I would guess, because I bet the over here, right? And hear me out on it. I think other people might start to come along on this narrative. Without his down the play, kind of players like a Travis Kelce, he's going to have to throw the ball horizontally, right? Like I was mentioning multiple times. That leads to a lot more pass attempts and a lot more pass completions. And I think because they're going to start to stack the box a little bit, I don't think, Detroit is going to let somebody like Pacheco go out there and just gash them on the ground. I think you're going to see Mahomes against one of the worst secondaries from last year, complete the ball over 25 times. I think well over 25 times. So this number before was minus 130 towards the over. That's when I bet it, right? I felt a lot better about it at that point. It is minus 120 towards the under. So I guess it's the square play here at this point, but I'd still bet it, right? Without Travis Kelce, and that was kind of what I was going off of when I made the bet, initially, was that Kelce wasn't going to play, was that they were going to have to throw more screens, right? They were going to use the screens, some of the, 1-2 yard passes as the running game, right? To go out there and do that. So what else did we take? So you could take that over here in underdog. Another prop that I took before it did get bumped was the over on David Montgomery rushing yards. That was at 52.5. Over here on the sports book, he was at 52.5, but minus 140 towards the over. So let's see. So they moved it to 53.5. So they bumped it up, but they took away the juice, which to me, bumping it up 1 yard and then taking away the juice really doesn't make that much sense. Like, do we really think he's going to get 53 yards? Like, is that what they're implying, that there was actually that much of a chance for him to go out there and get exactly 53 yards? I don't buy that, right? So I think if the Lions are going to be more competitive in this game, if anything, it helps David Montgomery even more, right? They're less of underdogs at this point. They're expected to be more competitive in this game. And if they grab a lead, Montgomery's going to get the ball early and often. So I like that over. He's an efficient runner. He's on an even better offensive line with the Detroit Lions, and overall just a better team, right? And when you're a running back, the game script, the game environment that you're in is just as important as the personnel around you. So if I was going to take anything right now, right, and I've already done all of my bets here for the first game, it would be these two players. I already have one in on this Patrick Mahomes over, which again, I guess in terms of the odds would be the quote unquote square play out there, but I really don't care, right? The script that I'm working off of, what I expect to see from years of football knowledge is the Chiefs to check the ball down a lot more than what we're used to seeing. I don't think we're going to see Patrick Mahomes be as explosive. Like you might get a deep play or two, right? It's Patty Mahomes, right? One of those speedy wide receivers gets open down the field, he's hitting them, right? So let's not say that can't happen, right? But in terms of setup plays, you're going to see a lot more of the short stuff, right? You're going to see a lot of the screen passes is what I'm trying to go at there. Jerick McKinnon in play? I do think so, especially if they're going to set up more screen passes. Never a big ceiling for him. Yeah, I think both players, I mean, you could throw CEH into the same argument, right? They got to score a touchdown, right? Any of those sort of players. So they all kind of cannibalize each other in terms of their exposure, right? In terms of their snap count. But yeah, I'd leave it at that. Sam Laporta, I think he's a good play. Yes. I can't talk up everyone though, or I got to keep a little bit for ourselves. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm playing Sam Laporta. He's a decent play for sure. He's low owned too. He's a young rookie, right? Kind of unknown. From what I hear, he's going to be really good after the catch. Tony is a blank, I guess. We don't have the finish to that there, Bobby. But I think he's a stud. He definitely gets hurt a lot, though. He's made of glass, but he's a stud. Let's take a look at what we got on Prize Picks. They had a prop for Patty Mahomes rushing yards at 17.5 before, but it looks like they took it off the board. Unfortunately, right after some of the Kelce news came out, a lot of the sports books, and I'll show you this over here, bumped Patty Mahomes, right? So he's up there to 20.5 rushing yards. So they bumped him a whole 3 yards there, and he's minus 120 towards the over. So the reason for that, by the way, is, without his, downfield wide receiver there in a Travis Kelce, might have to check down to just run a little bit, right? Try and create a little something with his feet. You see that from a lot of quarterbacks in the playoffs. And with his, back against the wall, right? Prime time game to start the year, you might see that from Patty Mahomes, right? It's a big game, right? He's going to try and do his best to go out there and win it. Every game's like that. These guys are putting everything on the line pretty much week in, week out, especially when it's the home opener, right? You're in front of everyone's eyes. Like it feels like a Super Bowl almost. So I like that for Patty Mahomes. I like that for some of our bets earlier, but unfortunately, it's no longer available. Let's see it. Is it available on Underdog? I got it at 20.5, but yeah, that 17.5 that we got, I felt pretty decent about. Let's see. What do they have David Montgomery at over here on Prize Picks? 53.5. So yeah, you could take that over there as well. Outside of that, that is all I've got. I've got to get to a watch party out here to watch this game. So we're going to go ahead and end this stream now. We'll go over any questions that came up and hop on out of here. He has slate breaking ability is what you were saying. I would tend to agree with that for sure. He could score 2 touchdowns, right? Especially because he's that gadget type of guy. I mean, they used him in the Super Bowl for a setup play. Imagine a regular season game, right? Now that they don't have Travis Kelce. I agree. Right, especially at low ownership, that's for sure. That's all we've got, though. Cheers to everyone out there. Hopefully, you have a solid start to your year. For access for all of the content I have to offer, check out the Patreon page. There is a link in the description of the live stream. But until then, guys, best of luck out there. Hopefully, we see a few takedowns from the community, and let's have ourselves a Thursday night football slate.